whatever we're doing. I will put it online on the YouTube channel tonight, so you can refer to it if you feel the need to go over some stuff. All right, so let me get the lights. So first off, some basics. We're doing the exam next Tuesday. We're doing it in class. It will run from 5:30 until 6:45 as if it was a regular class, okay? So if you get here late, that's just less time for you because I have another class that I have to teach after ours. So I can't keep you here even if I wanted to. I already mentioned that not showing up is not an option. I will consider that just an automatic 0. So make all arrangements with work, family, transportation, whatever, to get here to do your exam on Tuesday, okay? If you want to email me an outline of your answers, feel free to do so anytime up until Monday night, but the later you send it to me, the less time I will have to turn it around and get it to you as soon as you want it. And let's just assume that if you send me something on a Monday night at 7:30 p.m., you're probably not going to hear from me because by that point I'm turning off the work email. So if you want to send me something, send it to me on the weekend or Friday or whatever. And remember, when you're writing your answers, you'll be writing full sentences and paragraphs, but you can email me just an outline. You don't have to write out the whole thing. You just send me your notes. These are the things that I'm going to include in question 1, question 2, question 3. But on the day of the exam, you'll be writing out full sentences and paragraphs. You won't have any notes or books to use, so once you prepare your answers, make sure to just read them and read them and read them and read them until you're just sick of reading your answers and they're just a part of your day. So that when you come in, I give you the exam book, I give you the question sheet, you sit down and you just write, and as soon as you're done, leave. Now it's an hour and 15 minutes, which gives you 37.5 minutes per answer, because you're answering 2 questions. 37.5 minutes is a long time. You can write a lot in 37.5 minutes. And all of you are capable to write straight for an hour and 15. The only hindrance is going to be if you're not as prepared as you want to be and you sort of are trying to remember, what was that thing that we did 3 weeks ago, etc., etc. Do the outline at home and just read it and read it and read it and read it and read it, okay? And always, always, always remember, have a strategy. You have 3 questions that you have to prepare. If you can't do 3 perfect questions, then make sure you do 3 less than perfect questions, because you got to have something. You have to have something, regardless of what I ask you. You have to have something to write down. Because remember, everyone is answering question 1 on the day of the midterm, and then I will choose which of these 2 you will answer. So if you come in here and you haven't prepared all 3, you might get, like an A+ on this question, but then nothing on this stuff. And a 50 out of 100 is still an F. It's a strong F, but it's an F. So make sure you have something to write for all 3. Definitely this, something for both of these. So start now so that you can incorporate into your life any unpredictable, unexpected happening. Work, family, personal illness, whatever the case may be. You leave it to the last minute, something's going to get in the way. And you won't have enough time to put the stuff together, and you won't have enough time to learn it. So start now, okay? Now, with that bit of drama, let's get started. So everyone is answering question 1 on exam day. So let me read this out and let me go through my notes about what I think you should be referring to as you build your answer. And at any time, if you want to ask, should we put this in there? Should we put that? Feel free, because that'll be most helpful. Liberty is a central part of American history, from settlement to the market revolution. Prove this statement by discussing the liberties and rights the American colonists expected as transplants from England, so when they first came here from England, the liberties at stake in the American Revolution, the new liberties expected after independence, the liberties at stake in the Federalist Republican battles of the 1790s, and the concept of liberty that developed during the Market Revolution. Okay? So, how do you do this? Well, first off, and do I have, I hope I do. Do I have it? I don't. Alright, thought I had it with me. Does anybody have a syllabus handy that I could refer to? Actually, you know what? Don't even bother. I'll just pull it up so everybody could see. Okay. So, all right. To answer that first part, what kind of liberty was expected by the first transplants from England to here? I think you got to start off with the very first chapter we did, chapter 2, the beginnings of English America, and chapter 3, creating Anglo-America. Both of these chapters will tell you what the first settlers who came to Jamestown, Virginia, and the Puritan settlers in Massachusetts, what did they expect when they got here? And chapter 3 broadens that and talks about what did the people that settled in New York expect, the people that settled in Pennsylvania expect, etc. All right? That'll tell you. Remember when we were first at the beginning of this semester talking about, well, do you remember? What did the people expect in terms of basic political rights when they got here? Do you remember what they were all promised and what they all got? That's not a political right.
Choose their own parliament?
To have their own government, right? So the Puritans gave it to their people, the people in Virginia gave it to them, which meant the New Yorkers had to offer it, the Georgians had, et cetera, et cetera. But there was other stuff as well, all right? Now, do you remember what early document we looked at which really brought together all the assumptions that English colonists to America believed were their rights?
English Bill of Rights.
The English Bill of Rights. So in addition to referring to chapter 2 and chapter 3 for the first settlers expected this right would be granted to them, and it wasn't just representative government, it was a couple of other things. Refer to the English Bill of Rights. Refer to some of the stuff in there and your textbook readings and what the early settlers expected. They expected land, but they also expected representative government.
And to create their own church and stuff like that.
Yeah, religious freedom. So look through those chapters. Most importantly, look through your PowerPoint presentation on Blackboard, which gives you some of the details you need for this, in addition to your lecture notes. And do not forget to remember to refer to the English Bill of Rights, because this is just a whole list of what Americans expected as they came to the New World. Even though it's the English Bill of Rights, which was passed by Parliament in England, it brought into real life the expectations that the English and those that came to America expected was their right from their government. Now, when you get to the American Revolution, obviously chapter 5 is going to be your bread and butter. This gives you everything. What rights were being fought for, why were the Americans upset, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now, the Declaration of Independence is also something you should be referring to, because it has that first paragraph which says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, etc., which is a good brief summary of the rights the Americans felt they had: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, natural rights. which the British were also threatening. But then the Declaration of Independence is also the last couple of pages, one long list of things that the British violated. And you can refer to that as well as part of your answer. Let me see. When you get to the section that says the liberties expected immediately after the revolution, you want to refer to chapter 6. The section that says, after you deal with that part of you've already dealt with the first colonists. I just talked about the liberties at stake during the American Revolution. All right? And now we're into this section. The new liberties expected after independence was acquired. Okay? For that, it's chapter 6. This is the chapter that talks about the reduction, the increase of white male voting, the abolition of slavery, things like that. The liberties expected because of the war that was just won, which was fought on the principle of equality. Now, all right. What's a good document to encapsulate all the rights that Americans expected? The U.S. Bill of Rights. So when you're dealing with that section, the liberties expected after the Revolution, you can refer to the U.S. Bill of Rights. Okay?
The letter between Abigail
And John Adams? You can mention anything you want, but you have to make sure that you answer the question. If you're going to talk about those letters between John and Abigail Adams, you would do it from the perspective of there was a demand for greater equality on the part of women at a time when everybody was talking about equality, but the men, the founding fathers, had a very specific idea of who equality was for at that time. So that's how I would use the letters. Okay? Now, when I've asked this question in the past, question 1, what tends to make people a little bit crazy is the liberties at stake during the Federalist and Republican battles of the 1790s. First off, for that, you need this. It's chapter 8. Chapter 8 is, all of it is about the birth of the Federalist Party, the birth of the Republican Party, the fight between Jefferson and Hamilton over what role the national government should have, how much individual rights should be protected in this new, stronger national government. So, when you are answering question 1 and you're trying to figure out what liberties were at stake in the Federalist and Republican battles of the 1790s, chapter 8 is where you're going. All right? Chapter 8 is where you're going. You don't need, you could use the U.S. Bill of Rights here as well. And here I would use it from the perspective of Jefferson really believed in the U.S. Bill of Rights, whereas John Adams had a slightly different view. So, this part here, let me go over this with some details so that you have an understanding of what I'm talking about. Somebody had a hand up. Pedro?
We focus on the political ideologies of both parties. Like one wanted strong central government, the other one wanted more local government, power.
States' rights, etc. Yeah. Lorenzo?
We were talking about when they were in terms.
Like,
Right here,
well,
for this section here, Federalist-Republican battles.
I know it's the battle, but I was wondering if you could talk about the terms, like when John Adams was there, what rights did what rights did he just like say, no, you can't do this, or you can.
That's one way of approaching it. But I would answer this question from the perspective of there's a variety of definitions of liberty, all right? And let me give you this, and then hopefully you can work from this. Which of the two parties, the Federalists or the Republicans, were more committed to defending individual civil rights? The Republicans or the Federalists? The Republicans, right? Jefferson campaigned for president in 1800 on the promise that he was going to protect civil rights. He was going to uphold the U.S. Bill of Rights, which John Adams had violated. Remember with which law? The Alien and Sedition Act, right? It violated the First Amendment. All right? You remember this from Howard Zinn. Now, the other definition of liberty, if the Republican definition of liberty is the protection of civil rights with a small government, the Federalist definition of liberty is a strong government enforcing the rules. The reason why this question sometimes gets a little tricky for people is because up until the 1790s, in this class, when we talk about the fight for American liberties, it's always the right to do more and more. The right to vote, the right, taxation with representation, the right to pray to whatever God you wanted, the right to do this, the right to do that. It's all about removing the barriers of government limitation or social limitation, right? And everything you've read, the English Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Bill of Rights, is all a list of what we want or what we're fighting to get or what we've already achieved, right? When it comes to the Federalist and Republican battles of the 1790s, the fight is over. Is there such a thing as too much democracy, too much liberty? For Jefferson and the Republicans, the answer is no. The people should be allowed to protest and basically have a say in any way they want on their government. The Federalists are a much more elite-driven party. They are concerned with the people who don't have the education or the experience having too much of a say in the way the government runs. So there are two definitions of liberty here. The Republicans who think the people should be allowed to do what they want, and the Federalists who believe if you want to protect liberty, you need law and order to protect people's rights. So give some examples of how the Federalists tried to protect liberty by enforcing law and order, and some examples of how the Republicans said, no, we believe it should be this. So you see what I'm talking about here? Think about the fights that Jefferson and Hamilton had, and Jefferson and Adams. Like Pedro said, how did the Republican Party and the Federalist Party simply differ? Now, when you get to the concept of liberty that developed during the market revolution, we just did this a couple of days ago. Yeah?
Basically talk about how they weren't really concerned about their rights as a U.S. American citizen. They were more focused on their natural rights because they're like the rights in the Bill of Rights were there. It was there. There was nobody who was going to take it from them.
Right.
But now they were focused on their natural rights. Oh, if I'm able to go from point A to point B, like if he's able to go to point A to point B, why can't I? That was towards like the blacks who weren't allowed in Oregon and all that.
Right. But let's just be clear. When you say natural rights, you're talking about like
Freedom,
life, liberty, and the protection of your property by government that you choose, right? Now that's already taken for granted. That's in the Constitution. It's in the Bill of Rights, the states' constitutions.
And the freedom to like the freedom for their own happiness, like
that's what we're getting at here. In the market revolution, it's no longer the list of things, First Amendment, Second Amendment, the right to do this, the right to do that. It's What did all these people want in the market revolution? What defined the market revolution?
Individual.
Individualism, railroads, but the railroads, the canals, the expanding cities, what did that all lead to for America? How did America transform during the market revolution? Pedro? Innovation, but what was the result of it? What was the quality of life for many people like during the market revolution? It improved. The economy expanded. There was more jobs. There was more farmland, et cetera, et cetera. This is the market, the capitalist market revolution, right? The expansion of American capitalism, where for many people, not all, there was a significant increase in income and opportunity. And to take advantage of all those economic opportunities, what did people demand the right of or for? What did they want in the midst of all these opportunities? What did they want? They want to be left alone. They want to be able to try anything, do anything, and take advantage of all these opportunities. Individual self-fulfillment or self-advancement. So talk about that. Talk about the economic changes and how people want to take advantage of them. So let's take a moment. Let's look at our notes. Let's look at the question up on the screen. Let's just think for a moment if what needs to be repeated, fine-tuned, etc. I'm not going anywhere. I am running on about 87 Oreos, so I am jacked for at least another half hour. I'm not kidding. I bought a big bag yesterday because it's just been one of those weeks.
Fry them.
Fry them?
Fried Oreos. You put
You never
it
ate
in
fried
pancake
Oreos?
batter. It's so
Yes,
good. You would love
They're
it.
really good.
And put powdered sugar on it.
All right, before we record Oreo recipes for future usages, because I'll make this available to my classes, but thank you, madam, who will not be named, with the Oreo recipes. Okay, but I'll probably try that now that you mention it. So, did anybody have? Yes, Lorenzo.
It's not much of a problem that I have. It's just that basically with Adams, basically how I was gonna approach it was basically write it down, say what he did, that he took the rights, the liberties of the people, and then what Jefferson did to give them back, and say this is what I'll do, and then basically how you just bashed Adams in his election. His second election and became president.
I think that would be a good way to approach it. You start off with the basic ideologies of both parties, and what did Adams do to infringe on civil rights? Alien and Sedition Act, for instance. And what did Jefferson do? What did he say that he would do? And what did he do when he came to office? Now remember, you did read for me Jefferson's first inaugural speech that lays out this is how the Republicans differ from the Federalists. We believe in freedom, free trade, religious freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good document to refer to. So, question 1. Is there anything about question 1 that needs repetition, fine-tuning, anything? Do you know where to get the information? What chapters, etc.? Yeah? And you know where to get the PowerPoints on Blackboard? Yeah? What about the recorded lectures? On the recorded lectures, everything from Chapter 5, the American Revolution, up until Chapter 9, which we just did on Tuesday, is all already on YouTube. And the link, as I've mentioned before, is right there. Recorded lectures. You see them? Just click on that. You click on the playlist, and there you have it. Everything from Chapter 9, all the way to Chapter 5. Now, I apologize, the recording quality for the earlier ones are kind of low, so you have to turn up the volume quite a bit, maybe use earbuds. I'll redo them next year or something, but you can make out what I'm saying. And it follows the PowerPoints exactly. All right, so it'll be like having the lecture all over again. The remaining ones are regular volume, maybe even too loud, but they're all there for you to use at any time you want. Okay, shall we continue? Okay, so question one, everybody is doing on the day of the midterm exam. That is not, there's going to be no surprise. You will see question one on the day of the midterm, which is Tuesday. So let's talk about question two. You will prepare both of these, 2 and 3, and I will choose one of these on the day of. Don't guess. You'll likely guess wrong. Now, from the beginning, America has had 2 different regions, a northern and a southern one, with different economies, societies, and cultures. First, define these differences and their origins. Why were they different? Then, highlight the different goals or views of the 2 regions in the following episodes in American history: the negotiations over the Constitution, the political battles of the Federalists and the Republicans of the 1790s, the War of 1812, and the Market Revolution. So what I am saying in question 2 is that throughout American history, early American history, the North and South, right from the very beginning, were different. And because they were different, they had different needs from their government. And those different needs always came up at critical periods in American history, like the negotiation of the Constitution and these other things. So, first off, in terms of the differences between the North and the South, this one is kind of a gimme. It's pretty straightforward. What is the major difference between the northern states and the northern colonies and the southern colonies? Slavery, right? Slavery in the South, less and eventually no slavery in the North. Which region has more cities? Which regions has more large farms and plantations? Okay. Which region has more factories eventually? The factories. Which region eventually has the most railroads? Right? Which region eventually is where all the immigrants go to for all the new jobs and so on and so forth? Where do they go? Okay. So, which region has public education? The North, right? And small towns. Which region has more small towns? No. The North. Yeah. Because before you have cities, you have small towns, which then, right, expand. So, but, you know, you got 99% right. You should be proud. Now, let me see. What else can I... Okay. Which region do you think had more voter participation because there was more people that owned property? Really?
No.
In the South, it was predominantly large plantations owned by one person, and that one person controlled the politics, the economy, etc. In the North, you had much more small farms, right? Small businesses in the towns and the cities. And if you had property, you were allowed to vote. So which region had more voters? The North. So the North was more democratic. The South was more hierarchical. A few people that controlled everything and everyone else had to follow. Poor whites as well as enslaved and free blacks. Now, so that's the beginning. Now, in terms of why these differences developed, why do you think is the major difference why you can grow cotton in the South but you can't grow it in Minnesota? Climate. Climate. The South is just more adaptable to plantation crops, and like that's easy. But what group came to the Americas and they had a very specific idea that when you landed, everyone got their own town that had their own school and their own church? What group established that custom? What group came to America for really purely religious reasons? Was that the Puritans? And when they set up their towns, every town, church, school. And that idea spread throughout the North and from the Northeast to the Northwest. The South, not so much. So there's that. There's climate, and there's also the fact of the Puritan settlement. So keep that in mind. Now, when you start getting into the Constitution, this is where you can pull out, okay, certainly you're going to use, for the Constitution battles, let's go back to the syllabus, you're going to be using Chapter 7. when you talk about the North and South fight during the Constitution, the negotiations and all the compromises between Northerners and Southerners, Chapter 7 is your bread and butter for that part of question 2, right? Plus your essay, your readings, John Roche, Howard Zinn, all of that stuff is important. So when you're asking, like right now you might say, well, how the hell do I know what the North and the South wanted during the Constitution? Well, didn't you read about a Virginia plan and a New Jersey plan? Right? Well, Virginia's in the South, New Jersey's in the North. Now, those were big states, small state, but it's a beginning. All right? It's a beginning of your answer. Because most southern states were actually quite small. Now, what else? What was the compromise over slavery? What was it? The 3/5, right? Now, that was given in compromise to the South, right? But there was another. What was the other compromise over slavery that was also to satisfy the South? 20-year expansion of the slave trade. 1808. And there was one final one. What did the South really want in the Constitution to guarantee that their slaves couldn't run away? What was it called? Fugitive Slave Clause. So this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about Northerners and Southerners had different demands over what this new government was supposed to look like. And in order to satisfy both sides, they came up with these compromises. You know, Northerners did not want the South to count their slaves as full people. So they said 3/5. Northerners did not want the slave trade to go on forever. So they got the limitation down to 20, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you really want to impress me, John Roche makes a mention about something along the lines of bills having to do with trade, that there was a compromise there between the North and the South. Okay? Now, let me see, what else? Good. All right. Now, when it comes to the Federalists and the Republicans, you just have to ask yourself one simple question. And for that, you just go back to Chapter 8. Where did the Federalist Party do best in the elections? What region of the country, North or South? What party, the Federalist Party, what part of the country did they do best in when it came to elections? The North. Why is the answer? Well, you don't have to tell me. You can just, make a note of it. The Federalists did better in the North because they represent these interests that were important to the North. The Republicans did better in the South because they represented these interests that were important to the Southerners. I know you would have told me. I'm very excited about all this excitement. It makes me excited.
I'm happy I know this.
I know, but I suspect you probably know a whole lot of things. So we'll give it out slowly but surely. The War of 1812. Ask yourself the question: which region of the country supported the war? Which region of the country opposed the war? So does anybody know which region opposed the War of 1812, the war against Britain? Who opposed it? Kelly? The Federalists,
Yeah.
which were strongest in what part of the country, North or South? The North. So then, fill in the...
They vanished because people...
Yes, exactly. So, as part of your answer, say the North, as represented by the Federalist Party, opposed the War of 1812 with Britain because... ... Right? Northerners didn't want the war because of these reasons. Southerners wanted the war because of these reasons. Okay? And finally, when you get to the market revolution, this one is just a gimme. In a nutshell, during the market revolution, the North and the South became more and more different. What was happening in the North during the market revolution? What was happening in the South during the market revolution? Now remember, when you're answering this question, don't just say there was lots and lots of railroads. Okay, but they were built more in what part of the country? Railroads? No, the north. Factories, the cities, the commercial farms, right? But don't just tell me there was a lot of railroads built and a lot of canals. Tell me how northern economy and society changed as it expanded from the northeast into the northwest. How did the south change, become even more different than the north during the market revolution? Remember, this is the era of the expansion of cotton plantations. So how did the north and the south simply become, what was happening during the market revolution in each region that made them more and more different? Okay? And that's all chapter 9. The market revolution stuff. The War of 1812 and the Federalists and the Republicans, that's all chapter 8. And let's see. The Constitution, we said, was chapter 7. And in terms of the early origins and differences between the two regions, that's basically chapter 2. And yeah, it's basically chapter 2 and 3. So take a moment, take a look at question 2, take a look at your notes. Now remember, for question 2, you've got lots and lots of PowerPoints, your readings. You did read sections of the Constitution, so you could use that. What else? Those are the only documents that come to mind that I would recommend you refer to. And oh, right, you've got the John Roche and the Howard Zinn stuff that you could refer to when it comes to the negotiations of the Constitution. Oh, and then lots and lots of recorded lectures. All of chapter 7, all of chapter 8, all of chapter 9, those lectures were recorded at a decent volume available on YouTube, which you can get to through Blackboard. So take a moment, think about question 2. Is any part of it requiring some clarification or repetition? You okay to move forward? Okay. So, question 3. Remember, you'll be answering either 2 or 3. I will do the choosing. War and rebellion have played critical roles in the development of American history. Prove this statement by discussing the consequences of the 7 Years' War, the Boston Tea Party, Shays' Rebellion, and notice Shays' Rebellion. The guy's name is actually Shays and then apostrophe. The most common error in those papers is always... Yeah, exactly. The Whiskey Rebellion, the Barbary Wars, the War of 1812. So, when you go through this, I'm not looking for a long definition of what was the War of 1812, what were the Barbary Wars. I'm really looking for what the question asks, which is consequences. The point that I want you to grasp with question 3 is that American history, in its short period of time that we've covered, has had significant changes because of particular wars or rebellion that had huge consequences afterwards. So, for instance, and by the way, make a note of this, the 7 Years' War is obviously covered with Chapter 5 in the American Revolution. The Boston Tea Party is also covered in Chapter 5 in the American Revolution. Shays' Rebellion is Chapter 7, when they talk about the Constitution, the problems with America, the Constitution was supposed to fix. The Whiskey Rebellion is Chapter 8, when they talk about the Federalists and the Republicans and how they handled popular uprisings. The Barbary Wars is also Chapter 8, specifically Jefferson going to war, why did he do it, etc., etc. And the War of 1812 is also chapter 8. It finishes chapter 8, in fact.
Shays Rebellion is in what chapter?
7. And remember, if you ever get curious and you need a quick page reference to where a term exists, where in your textbook would you look?
In the back.
In the index, in the back. Just open up the back of your textbook, find the word in alphabetical order. It'll tell you every page that it's located on. It'll make your life very simple. It's like a Google search, but manual and slower. Now, let me just give you an example of how to answer question 3. In the 7 Years' War, do you remember who won that war? Britain. Do you remember who they beat? And who else? Spain. Right? Now, Britain, what was the state of Britain after having won the 7 Years' War? Yeah?
They just broke basically.
Broke. And what did they do?
Tax America.
And how did the Americans respond to this taxation without representation?
Not doing it.
They were unhappy, right? So that's how you answer the first part. Identify the issue, 7 Years' War, and what was the big result of the end of this conflict? Shays Rebellion. Nope, wait, sorry. The Boston Tea Party. You remember, the Americans dumped a bunch of tea into the water, the British got upset, and they passed the, what were they called? Begins with an I. The Intolerable Acts, which then the Americans responded in what fashion? Good or bad? And they went and got organized, etc., etc. And so that's where you finish your answer there. Shays Rebellion, identify it. How did the American governing community react to a bunch of farmers rising up and not wanting to pay their bills? How did they react to that? And to the weakness of the government to enforce law and order. How did they react to that? What was the result? A weak government allowed for popular insurrection against the banks and so on and so forth because the economy was such a mess. And the American governing class, how did they strengthen the national government? What did they do? The Constitution. All right? The Whiskey Rebellion, identify what that is. How did the government react to it? Who was in power when the Whiskey Rebellion took place? Do you remember? Pennsylvania, 1794. Who was in power? The Federalists or the Republicans? The Federalists. They put down the Whiskey Rebellion. Make a note to yourself. How did the Republicans respond to the use of military force against a popular uprising? What effect did it have in the 1800 presidential election when Jefferson, the Republican, ran against Adams, the Federalist? The Barbary Wars. What were they? They were fought by President Jefferson. How did the Barbary Wars alter what Jefferson promised he was going to do? Remember, in the inaugural address, he made some promises about how he was going to run the country. Then the Barbary Wars came along, and he had to change tactics. So that's the effect of the Barbary Wars. What were they? And the War of 1812 is pretty straightforward. Just go to chapter 8 or go to your lecture notes or your PowerPoint presentations. The war is over. The British are beaten, or it's a draw, depending on who you talk to. But what are the consequences? What happens to, and you don't have to say this out loud, the Federalist Party? What happens to Native Americans? What happens to the American West? Etc., etc., etc. So question 3 is, in many ways, once you've done all the work for question 1 and 2, question 3 it'll be a piece of cake for you. Because you've already have gone through all the chapters already, building your answer for question 1 and 2. Like you're going to come across the 7 Years' War when you're prepping the American Revolution. You're going to come across the Boston Tea Party, all that stuff. So it's just a matter of going back into your notes and then organizing your answer to fulfill question 3. So take a moment, look at question 3. What requires repetition, clarification, etc.
For the Shades Rebellion, you said you want us to describe how the government like strengthened the banks also. Right?
The government.
Strengthened the banks, like help the banks to.
Well, what I want you to focus on is Shays' Rebellion is a bunch of farmers, former soldiers, who rose up against banks who were foreclosing on their territory. They were essentially breaking the law. They were breaking the law. They didn't want to pay their bills because they had no money and they didn't want to lose their land. The banks had every right to foreclose on their territory, but these farmers felt like, they fought the war. My land is my land, end of story. This happened under the Articles of Confederation, which produced a weak government. So, how did the American governing class attempt to solve the weakness of the Articles of Confederation? What did they offer in replacement? The Constitution. What did the Constitution do? That kind of thing. Yes, Zira, and then Lorenzo.
Can we talk about the war bonds?
In
That one.
let me see. Yeah, if you're going to talk about Daniel Shays' rebellion as representative of the weakness of the government, the inability to pay off the war bonds, which led to people being upset, which then led to demands for a stronger central government, that's a good connection. Yeah.
Just a clarification. Basically, with each of these events, you want us to basically say what it was and what was the result of it.
Yeah, the major resulting
Yeah.
consequences of it.
What was like the game changer after
Yeah,
this?
exactly. But you got to speak,
Yeah.
broadly, not just 7 Years' War, Britain bankrupt, tax the Americans. Yeah, but then the Americans responded and blah, 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 blah. You don't have to recount the whole American Revolution, but show me how there was a major... The fact that the British taxed the Americans, that's a big game changer, right? But the real important part is how the Americans responded, which was, we're not going to have this, right? Okay. So, anything else about question 3? So, of these 3 questions, which are guaranteed to be on the exam? Question 1.
1 and 2.
These 3 questions, how many are you preparing?
3.
Good. That's all you got to do. Prepare everything. Don't listen to him. Prepare everything on this sheet. When you come in, I will give you a sheet of paper that says, answer these 2. You won't know which they are, except for you'll know that this is definitely one of them. And then I will give you an empty exam booklet, and you will start writing out your answers, and then you will go home when you're finished. And remember, no notes, no books during the exam, so prepare your answers at home and just read it. Okay? So with that, I'm going to shut this off, and you'll have a good